Welcome, everyone, to today's Scaling with People podcast. I'm Guinevere Curry, founder and CEO of Guide to HR, and I'm excited to bring in Amit and Kumar Ramal from Chintan Project, and we're going to be talking about how you think about setting up your business from a family perspective. So as I was talking to you both earlier today, you shared a really interesting stat with me. 87% of American businesses are family owned. But you were saying something about it's a different number in your mind. What is that number? And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Guinevere.
Thank you very much for having us, Guinevere. We are looking forward to this discussion with you. Yes, we do think that 87% is an underestimate. We think it's pretty much 100. And here's why. Even the President of the United States is frequently accountable to a spouse. And they do impact on decisions that get made. Only the brave among presidents admit that.
They always said a good man has a woman behind him, right? A good woman has a man behind him. A good person has a good spouse behind them.
I was about to say, those times, hopefully, will rapidly be upon us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so true. When you say that, like I think about even my business, I own my business. It's my business. I solely own it. It's not family run. But when I'm making big financial decisions of giving back into my business to continue growing it, I do talk to my husband for sure, because that has a financial impact to the household. So you're right. Like in that perspective, we are 100% family run.
There are other ways that it does impact that you may not even have considered.
And what are those?
If your relationship feels stable, you will make different decisions from if it does not.
Makes sense.
If you perceive that your relationship is at risk, you consciously or unconsciously make decisions to look after yourself.
That's so true. Very true.
And the relationships you bring up might involve a spouse. I will say that it is frequently even a business partner. Because if you think of how so many founders start their businesses, is because, as Pete Cunningham said, they had a seizure in the shower. They thought, boy, I could do this, and people want it, and I could make money at it, and I can take over the world after all.
That's what we all want to do in our enterprising businesses.
Okay. A series of seizures, shall I say.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But
and yet, okay.
It's hilarious because it's so true. There is comedy in the tragedy of how many businesses get started off that entrepreneurial seizure along the lines of what Michael Gerber talks about in E-Myth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are so many companies popping in my head that are like definitely have had tragedy because they haven't set themselves up right and recognizing it's a family business and how to put the proper foundation in place to support that. And as we were talking briefly, there's no shortage of business strategies and courses out there, but there's relatively little help with businesses who are business owners who are trying to navigate the family aspect of the family business. What are the problems that you see most likely surfacing from this?
Well, let's look at the idea of family business a bit more broadly
Okay.
and tell a story like so many of your audience has likely experienced. They've had their seizure. They know, though, that they can't do this all alone.
Mm-hmm.
So they start thinking of how the heck am I going to take over the world? Right? So far, that's making
Absolutely.
sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's even hitting
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Then they start thinking, so I need X. X frequently at the start of a business is money, financial capital. Yet, as a friend of ours has reminded so many, even advanced, even mature businesses, even businesses that are about to be sold, we remind them frequently it's not money that you need, it's what you think money will buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so many entrepreneurs give up equity in exchange for money when here's a secret. That's how he speaks loudly.
I love it.
The money was frozen in the business in the first place. What do I mean by that? If I were to give most businesses only more financial capital, it will get stuck, get spent exactly as the previous dollar did.
Yep.
Instead, knowing how to think, how to leverage human capital, and how to solve problems differently is frequently what's needed, not just dollars. It's why VC, why venture capital typically doesn't expect too many of their acquisitions to flourish. They are looking for a home run. They can gamble or not on you.
Mm-hmm.
But as the founder, we'd argue it might not be wise to gamble on you or your business the same way, because you are not at equipoise. You are not equally fine if your business makes it or not. Frequently, VC is, because there is the next and the next after that.
Right.
So, as you consider what resources you need, think of it a bit like dating, and recognize that some of the same rules that govern human relationships in families or similar situations are exactly the rules that govern those relationships in business.
Yeah.
Let me explain a bit about that. We think, as we embark on the search for a partner, that we are seeking someone similar to us. We both have two eyes, one nose, one mouth. Look, we both breathe. What would you know? We were meant to be together and forever.
Yeah.
So we focus on similarities when we enter relationships.
Mm-hmm.
There are evolutionary reasons why that is so, but those are for our next podcast with you.
Okay, sounds good. I love it.
For today, let's say that this search for similarities is at risk, holds these same risks as the blind infatuation of teenagers
Mm.
hooking up. I think I am young enough to use that phrase and not get into political troubles.
I love it. That's so funny. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it definitely, I hear it and I think about like where I'm at in my journey as a founder and, definitely in that dating stage early on and what am I doing with this org and growing it. So I see definitely the similarities. I'm sure a lot of our audiences as well.
Yeah. And then what happens is that, if we use that dating analogy and just play it out for business, because that's so much of what we're doing, right? Is that in everything that exists, there are certain rules that govern a cycle. There's an infatuation, which is the creation phase, right? Like that's no business would ever be started if there wasn't an infatuation, thinking that you're gonna in some way beat the world, right?
Yep.
And then there's a maintain, and then there's a destroy, there's a decline phase that is natural unless we were to embark on steps to keep that from occurring.
Yeah.
Right. And as we are at that infatuation, that creation, that building phase, it is wise to consider what happens in the other phases if that partner were still there. So we frequently bring people on because of some, we really, really need that. But do you need that next year, the year after, 5 years from now, right? And as we look out in business, the things that attracted us to people in the first place is frequently the thing that upsets us as time goes on.
Yeah.
So a couple that starts dating might be all enthralled that they are both into sports until someone has to look after the crying baby during the Super Bowl,
Yep.
right? And it sounds like a an irrelevant story, but that's exactly what happens in businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So we go looking for someone who thinks differently, just like we do. It's that two eyes, one nose story again. Yet, what we really needed was someone to put rubber to road,
Mm-hmm.
to take our ideas and turn them into reality.
Yeah.
Remember Walt Disney's story. It's fine to build castles in the sky, then set to work to put the foundation into the ground. And I know we
Yeah.
messed up the Walt Disney's quote, but that was the
We all get it. It's such a great story too.
Yeah.
And you're right, like the foundation, that's for me, that gets my juices flowing. I love it. I love building foundation, helping founders build foundation. And as a founder myself, I'm actually in the journey of bringing on a partner and working on building the foundation that you guys are talking about. And you're right. Like I've known her for more than half of my life at this point in time. And we are friends first. And now we're going to be partners. And there's that relationship aspect of how do we work together and make sure that we don't hurt our friendship and hurt the business and all of the emotions that go around. And you go in with that honeymoon phase of like everything's grand, we're in love, it's wonderful, and then unfortunately, probably so much as marriage, a lot of partnerships fail, right? And so putting foundation in place to protect yourself, protect your business, protect each other is really key.
And one of the more precarious business partnership arrangements, it turns out, is so easy to start. 50-50, we say. What's unfair about that? And so much is.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we were to compare with a marriage situation, it never is 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
There is a series of oscillations of varying proportions, varying ratios, aren't there, of whose say matters.
Yeah.
And the difference in business is that we somehow try to reflect that in legal documents, which don't understand that today Guinevere will decide and tomorrow new partner decides.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
because as the business grows, so does the relationship, so do the needs, so do the things that you're focusing on.
yeah. And so having those discussions in advance are so important, as important as kids, no kids, how we feel about money, how, right? All of the discussions that wisdom, public, ancient wisdom has taught us are worthy to have before we get into, if you will, a marriage, right?
Mhm.
Are important to have in the course of a business relationship too.
It's like a
For
marriage counselor, but for
yeah,
business.
for
Mhm.
one of our companies, we are in the process of hiring a COO ourselves. And as we were describing this to her as a dating, she said, yeah, and it's like we're starting by holding hands. And we said, absolutely, you're getting it now,
Yep,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So what are some, oh, go ahead.
Uh, like we keep harping on the similarities in these situations because there is a perception, as an example, that because you know your partner, your pending your prospective partner for a long time, that you know this individual. And what we might propose is that you might not. And
Mhm.
the literature in human behavior will support us. Here's where that comes from. One might think that cohabiting before marriage increases the likelihood of a marriage surviving. It does not. So the
Interesting.
popular wisdom is that that does not. And
Yeah.
here's why, is that do you have friends that you say, man, I can, yeah, it's no big deal. I can put up with that
Mm-hmm.
for a day or two
Right.
or three or a month. But when there's a perception of permanence, and there's nothing that says marriage is permanent, but in some ways, marriage is almost easier these days to get in or out of than it is to get into a business relationship sometimes, depending on the structure.
True.
But depending on that, on what that is, the thing that you just tolerated suddenly becomes unbearable the moment it's perceived as permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And you have heard couples say, like, the moment we got married, this person changed. And
Yep.
sometimes it is the truth, because what happened is that the degree of tolerance either way was immediately altered
Mm-hmm.
by a structure, whatever import we attach to that structure. And as you bring a partner on, be aware of that. The
Yeah.
moment you are in that relationship, your friendship has structurally changed. We
Mm-hmm.
are not saying don't do it. What we are saying is don't be willfully blind that your mode of operation will just continue.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense.
It
100%.
changes
Yeah.
as soon as there's that perception of permanence, it
Yeah.
changes. And
Yeah.
we don't pre-calculate that as we get in, particularly during what we are calling here today the infatuation phase of a relationship. Right.
Yeah. Or
Right.
even if you do have some like mental capacity awareness of that, there's still that you can assume how you're going to act, but until you're in that moment, you don't know. Like, I'd love to believe that in an emergency, I'm going to be the one that steps up and actually does something good, not flee. but I don't
Mhm.
know. I've never been in that,
Yeah.
like in that situation. So it's the same concept, right?
So we make quite a careful business of studying human behavior in all kinds of situations. And so one time when we were in a small town in Connecticut, we had gone for Amit's eye appointment, and in a table next to us was a pastor counseling a couple who were going to get married. And he said, "How I wish that every couple will do the following:
Mm.
put up a plaque so it's visible before anyone enters the front door that says, 'Pardon the mess. Marriage under construction.'"
I love it.
And we would propose that that same thing is worth having in any business partnership too. After the lawyers are all done, there is a partnership under construction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so there's a physics law that says that things will naturally progress towards entropy, towards from order to disorder.
Mm.
And yet that we are alive in form proves that that alone is not true. It's very non-entropic for us to be in the form that we are. Just think of how
Mm-hmm.
much order had to be created out of that, right?
Yeah.
For some bunch of chemicals to be us. And so the same thing works for a business. It takes energy to maintain that. And so it
Yeah.
is a partnership under persistent construction
Mm-hmm.
for a business to fly if you're going to work with others.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And again, I see the personal and the business relationships
Yeah.
intertwine so clearly from that perspective. And so to wrap up, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what Chintan Project is all about. Would you mind sharing?
So, Guinevere, I had the gift of being called stupid.
Hmm.
So I learned to think for myself. I had the gift of being ignored. So I had the opportunity to study us humans, how we tick, how we relate, and what we do is leverage these rules, these natural laws that govern human behavior to solve business challenges, particularly the people challenges that occur at ownership levels. And if I may, the times when a problem is most likely to surface, when you're most likely to notice it, is, if you will, we've each got a bucket representing our ability to cope, right? And the only time you have any symptom, I learned this from my days as a physician, the only time you have any symptom at all is when your bucket is full and it overflows, right?
Yep.
Because otherwise, if you didn't sleep well last night and you're hungry and you fought with your spouse, you're more likely to snap at the person at work.
Yep.
And what's more, you're more likely to snap at the person who cuts you off on the road because your bucket is full,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And the same thing happens in business. So when the bucket is full, you're more likely to snap at people, at
Yeah.
others. And we have found that there are definitely two predictable times when the business owner's bucket is full. One is at startup
Yep.
and one is at exit.
Mm. So
And
I'm
so,
very much part of the startup side. I've done
yeah.
some exit side, but how is it in the exit side?
So what happens is, remember that seizure the entrepreneur had and the dream to take over the world.
Mhm.
Rarely does business at exit match exactly that vision.
Mhm.
And so there is some regret, some shame, some guilt in the heart of the owner frequently at the time of exit. And this places stress on relationships within ownership teams that all by itself can hold up, hinder, and exit. We have said if the within the selling team there are squabbles, if there's blood in the water, the sharks will come
Mhm.
out, and your
Yeah.
business will be significantly devalued if you don't sort out the people problems before the
Mhm.
buyers get into serious discussions with you. And today, so much of our work is helping selling teams get ready to exit. Because a business is people. You know
Yeah.
that from your work. The
Yeah.
business is the people. There's an idea, there's a dream, there's a seizure, and then there's the people that make it happen.
Yep.
And so if you were to an attempt to sell the business without the people piece, there are few businesses that would work that way. Sometimes
Mhm.
there's somebody who's written code, they've got software that's code. And then you know what holds up most software code companies from being sold? The people. Right? So the code,
Yeah.
and it's the you've got somebody who says, no, you will not add a line to my code. Right?
Yep. Yeah. That's my baby. You're not going to
Yeah,
mess with it.
yeah, that's right. So that
Yeah.
so we can't separate in some ways people from the business. And what we
Mhm.
do is to help solve those people problems
Okay, great. Well,
on both
that's very
sides.
valuable and very needed, especially as companies start to grow and have that exit. And if they do have the partnerships involved, making sure that there isn't any blood in the water to keep the value high so that everyone can cash out and go off and do phase two of whatever their life is, right?
And
Well,
sorting out some of that those issues at startup when you're negotiating this process of partners, like what do I need a partner for? What's that partnership going to look like? Not just in the infatuation phase, not just in the maintain phase, but what are you going to do when the challenges happen, when the things that threaten to destroy a business show up?
yeah.
Why do I need that person at my side?
Hmm.
And
And
those are
to
frequently
answer
nothing.
those, okay.
Go ahead.
And to answer those questions while you're in the infatuation stage, so that if and when you get to that negative stage, you already know how you're going to handle it and it doesn't need to get even worse.
Guinevere, it's like you've seen this movie before.
Yeah, a couple companies do definitely come to mind.
Yeah.
I know one that was a husband and wife team, and they grew it. They probably had, I don't know, like through 4,000 employees,
Hmm.
hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. The marriage dissolved and partnership was, like you said, it was 50-50. And they pretty much almost killed the company and the valuation of the company. I think they lost about 98% of the valuation of their company
Yeah.
due to that whole
Yeah.
situation. So yeah, it
You
happens.
know
It
the
happens more
story of
often than
Two
not.
Sigma? Two Sigma, I think, is a
Yeah.
publicly held company that's been disclosed in their filings with the SEC that
Yeah.
because the partners get along, it's cost a few $1 billion.
Insane.
We do good work. Our consultation fees are not yet a few $1 billion.
But that's probably your dream to take over your world, right? Well, Amit and Kumar, it was so great connecting with you and learning from you. And you two are such an inspiration. I really enjoyed having you on the show. And I hope those that are listening have really thought about how they are interacting and engaging with the people in their lives. And if they are bringing on a partner, making sure that they create the right foundation in that infatuation mindset. So if and when the time comes and their bucket is full, that they don't end up destroying the business at the same time.
We'd love to connect with your audience. They can, the most effective way is still at our website, chintanproject.com, or they could connect with either of us at LinkedIn. And, we write an article at least once a month. And if you think we think differently here, we definitely think differently there too.
I love it. Well, it was great meeting you guys and having you on the call. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you for having us, Guinevere.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.